I'm proud to announce that my son Marcus will be taking over as CEO of Patterson Industries. It's time for the next generation to carry on the family legacy, my father declared at the annual shareholder meeting, and I watched from the third row as 12 years of my life evaporated into polite applause for a brother who had never worked a single day at the company I'd built from nothing. Marcus has the vision, the education, and the family name to lead us into the future. My brother stood to accept handshakes in his designer suit, fresh from his latest vacation, while I sat frozen in a chair I'd occupied since I was 22 years old, sacrificing salary, recognition, and any life outside these walls for promises that had just revealed themselves as lies. But why did I walk out without a word instead of fighting, and why, exactly 93 days later, did my phone ring at 2 a.m. with my brother's voice breaking as he sobbed that the company was $4 million in debt and I was the only person on earth who could save it? Vivian, please. I'm begging you. The bank is calling the loans. The suppliers are threatening to walk. I can't even access the financial systems, everything is password protected and nobody knows the codes. I let the silence stretch for 10 seconds. The password is family legacy, all one word, capital F and L. That's not it. I tried every variation. I changed it the day I walked out. To something you'll never guess. Vivian, please. Tell Dad I said goodnight, Marcus. I hung up and went back to sleep. The 12 years I'd given Patterson Industries had started the summer after I graduated from college. The company had been my father's dream, a manufacturing business he'd launched with a small inheritance and enormous ambition. But dreams don't pay bills, and by the time I graduated, Patterson Industries was hemorrhaging money. I need help, he told me. Just for a year or two. Get us back on our feet, and then you can pursue whatever you want. I'd agreed because he was my father. Because I believed in family. Because I thought sacrifice would be recognized and rewarded. That year or two became 12 years. The transformation I'd engineered was comprehensive. I'd restructured operations, cutting waste that had accumulated through years of inattention. I'd renegotiated supplier contracts, securing terms that improved margins by 18%. I'd developed new product lines, identified emerging markets, and built relationships with clients who'd become the backbone of our revenue. Patterson Industries grew from a struggling operation losing $200,000 annually to a profitable enterprise generating $3.4 million in yearly revenue. I'd done this without a salary. We can't afford to pay you what you're worth, my father had explained every year. But when the company is stable, when we're ready to transition leadership, you'll be rewarded. I promise. The promises accumulated like unpaid invoices. Marcus, meanwhile, had been pursuing his own interests. MBA programs that our father funded. Extended trips to study international business. Consulting gigs that somehow never produced tangible results. He'd visited Patterson Industries perhaps a dozen times in 12 years, always for family events, never for actual work. Marcus has vision, my father would say. He's learning the big picture while you handle the details. The details were everything. The details were the company. But details, apparently, didn't qualify for leadership. The shareholder meeting announcement hadn't been entirely unexpected. I'd seen signs over the previous year, my father including Marcus in strategic discussions Marcus didn't understand, referencing leadership transitions, without specifying what that meant, treating my input as less important while elevating my brother's occasional observations. But I'd believed, naively, that competence would matter. That 12 years of demonstrated performance would outweigh whatever gender bias or birth order preference was operating in my father's mind. I'd been wrong. Walking out had been instinctive. I'd sat through my father's announcement, through the applause, through the handshakes and congratulations directed at my brother. I'd watched Marcus accept credit for a company he couldn't have identified on a balance sheet. Then I'd stood, gathered my bag, and walked out. No confrontation. No tears. No satisfaction of seeing their reactions. Just departure. The next morning, I'd returned to the office before anyone else arrived. I'd changed every password on every system I'd designed. Financial software, client databases, vendor management platforms, manufacturing controls, everything that ran through the digital infrastructure I'd built over 12 years. Then I'd packed the personal items from my desk and left my keys with the security guard. "You're leaving?" he'd asked. "I'm done." "But you run this place." "Apparently not anymore." The first calls came within days. "My mother, your father didn't mean to hurt you. He's just traditional about these things. Come back and we'll work something out." "My brother, this is ridiculous. I need you to show me how things work. You can't just leave." "My father, you're being childish. The company needs you. Your brother needs you. Come back and stop this tantrum." I answered none of them. The silence I maintained was strategic. I wanted them to understand what they'd lost. Not through explanation, they wouldn't have listened anyway, but through experience. Let Marcus run the company he'd been handed. Let my father watch his family legacy in the hands of his chosen heir. Let the consequences teach lessons I couldn't. The first month brought confusion. Marcus couldn't access basic systems. The passwords I'd changed locked him out of everything essential. IT consultants he hired couldn't crack security I'd designed specifically to be uncrackable. She sabotaged us, Marcus complained to anyone who'd listen. She's destroying the company out of spite. But I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply stopped providing the access I'd always granted freely. The systems still worked, they just didn't work for people who didn't know the passwords. The second month brought cascading failures. Without access to financial systems, Marcus couldn't process payroll efficiently. Employees who'd trusted me for 12 years now faced delays and errors in their paychecks. Without access to vendor management, orders went unprocessed. Suppliers who'd given us favorable terms based on relationships I'd built began questioning their commitments. Without access to client databases, follow-ups didn't happen. Accounts I'd cultivated for years started receiving calls from competitors who sensed vulnerability. The third month brought disaster. A major client, one I'd secured personally, representing 22% of annual revenue, terminated their contract. We signed with Patterson Industries because of Vivian. If she's gone, our confidence is gone. A key supplier, frustrated by payment delays and communication breakdowns, demanded cash-on-delivery terms that shattered the company's cash flow. And the bank, reviewing quarterly financials that showed a company in freefall, called the loans that had funded our last expansion for $1 million in debt, payable immediately. The 2 a.m. call from Marcus had been preceded by dozens of others I'd ignored. But 2 a.m. calls feel different. The desperation is rawer, the pretense stripped away. Vivian, please. I'm begging you. Part of me felt satisfaction. Part felt grief. But mostly I felt nothing. The emotion I'd expected, vindication, perhaps, or righteous anger, hadn't materialized. I'd simply moved on. My father's call came 3 hours later. I made a mistake. Yes. I should have recognized what you built. I should have honored my promises. Yes. Will you come back? Will you save the company? I let the question sit in silence for a long moment. The company was never mine to save. You made that clear at the shareholder meeting. It's Marcus's company now. His legacy. His problem. He can't, the passwords, you're the only one who. I'm the only one who built the systems, yes. But I'm not the only one who could have learned them. You chose not to let me train anyone. You chose to treat my knowledge as a resource to exploit rather than an expertise to respect. Vivian. I'm building something new now. Something that's actually mine. I don't have time to rebuild something that was taken from me. That something new had started the week after I'd walked out. A consulting firm, initially, leveraging the expertise I'd developed at Patterson Industries to help other struggling manufacturers. Within 2 months, I had 4 clients. Within 3 months, I had 8. The market, it turned out, had plenty of companies that needed someone who could actually run operations. Someone who understood details. Someone who didn't think leadership meant taking credit for others' work. Patterson Industries' fate unfolded over the following months. The bank foreclosed on the loans. The company entered bankruptcy proceedings. Assets were sold to cover debts, employees were laid off, and the family legacy my father had sacrificed me to preserve simply ceased to exist. Marcus, who had never developed skills beyond accepting things handed to him, struggled to find his footing. His MBA meant little without experience to back it. His network, built on charm rather than competence, provided contacts but not opportunities. My father, watching his life's work dissolve, finally had time to understand what he'd lost. The conversation we eventually had was painful for both of us. I kept thinking you'd come back, he said. That you'd realize the company needed you and you'd put family first. I put family first for 12 years. I gave up a salary, a career, a life, all for promises you never intended to keep. I intended to keep them. Marcus is my son. The company should go to my son. I'm your child too. But apparently not the right kind. I didn't mean it that way. You meant it exactly that way. You gave Marcus the company because he's male. Because legacy means something different for daughters than sons. Because you could never quite see my work as real leadership. I was wrong. Yes. But being wrong doesn't undo the consequences. The company is gone. The employees lost their jobs. And I've built something new that doesn't depend on your approval. The consulting firm evolved into something more substantial. What started as operations consulting expanded into full manufacturing management services. Companies that couldn't afford full-time operational expertise contracted with me to provide it. Within 2 years, I employed 12 people. Within 3 years, 28. The skills my father had dismissed as details turned out to be exactly what the market needed. Operations. Logistics. Systems design. The unglamorous work that actually makes companies function. Marcus eventually found work at a mid-level management position. He was, by all accounts, competent at delegating and attending meetings, skills he'd developed as CEO of a company other people had actually run. We don't speak often. The resentment has faded into something more like indifference. He didn't steal the company from me, our father did. Marcus just accepted what was offered. I've stopped blaming him for being the son our father preferred. The password I'd changed everything to that final day was simple. My company now. Not because I was claiming Patterson Industries, I'd already surrendered that claim. But because I was declaring something else, whatever I built next would be mine. Truly mine. Unambiguously mine. No promises that would never be kept. No sacrifices that would never be recognized. No family obligations that demanded everything and offered nothing in return. My father and I have a relationship now, though it's different from before. He's older, diminished by the loss of his company and the recognition of his failures. We have dinner occasionally. We discuss news, grandchildren, weather. We don't discuss Patterson Industries. We don't discuss the shareholder meeting. We don't discuss the 12 years I gave and the way they ended. Some wounds heal better when you stop touching them. The 2 a.m. phone call remains the defining moment. Not because of what it revealed about my brother, I'd always known Marcus lacked the skills to run a company. But because of what it revealed about me. I'd expected to feel triumph when they needed me. Expected to savor their desperation, their recognition of my value, their regret for how they'd treated me. Instead, I'd felt nothing. The need for their validation had evaporated without my noticing. I'd become someone who didn't need them to recognize my worth. The company I run now generates $7.2 million in annual revenue. We employ 43 people, most of whom have families depending on their jobs. We serve clients across 6 states, providing the operational expertise that keeps their businesses functioning. I take a salary now, a good one. I have equity that's actually mine. I make decisions without waiting for approval from people who don't understand what they're approving. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if my father had kept his promises. If he'd named me CEO. If he'd recognized 12 years of work instead of dismissing them for gender-based tradition. Patterson Industries might still exist. My family might still be intact. I might still be giving everything to a company that would eventually reward me. But I wouldn't have built something of my own. Wouldn't have discovered that my skills had market value beyond what my family recognized. Wouldn't have learned that the need for parental approval was a chain I could break. The lesson wasn't about revenge. Walking away wasn't revenge. Changing the passwords wasn't revenge. Refusing to save them wasn't revenge. It was boundary setting. It was self-preservation. It was the recognition that people who take you for granted will continue taking you for granted until you stop letting them. My brother still doesn't understand what happened. You could have saved the company, he said during one of our rare conversations. You chose to let it die. I chose not to save people who had made clear they didn't value me. That's different from choosing destruction. But family. Family was supposed to mean something to you before I walked out. Not after you needed my passwords. The 2 a.m. call taught me the final lesson I needed. When Marcus sobbed that the company was $4 million in debt, that everything was falling apart, that I was the only one who could save them, I realized I'd been waiting for that moment for 12 years. Waiting for them to need me. Waiting for them to recognize my value. Waiting for the validation that would make all the sacrifice worthwhile. And when the moment arrived, I discovered I didn't need it anymore. The password they couldn't guess was my company now. The company was mine now. Not Patterson Industries, that was gone. Something better. Something that couldn't be given to my brother at a shareholder meeting. Something I'd built myself, for myself, answerable only to myself. I built my father's company from nothing for 12 years. No salary. No recognition. Just promises that someday, somehow, I'd be rewarded. Then at the shareholder meeting, he gave it all to my brother, who had never worked a single day there. Family legacy, he called it. I walked out without a word. Changed every password to systems only I understood. 3 months later, Marcus called at 2 a.m., sobbing. The company was $4 million in debt. The bank was calling loans. Suppliers were walking. And the only person who could access the systems was the sister they discarded. Tell Dad I said goodnight, I told him. Then I hung up and went back to sleep. The password they couldn't guess was my company now. Because it was something new. Something actually mine. Something that couldn't be handed to someone else in a meeting I wasn't warned about. They lost everything trying to preserve a legacy that excluded me. I gained everything by walking away from people who never deserved my sacrifice.